If you ever wonder why countries like America get so up in arms about their export controls, all you really need to do is watch this video. Today we're going to look into the latest weapon sensation sweeping all nations, the Shahed drone. Whether you call it a kamikaze drone, a one-way attack drone, a loitering munition, or just a pain in the ass, this expendable munition has been one of the main weapons leading the world into the drone age, by a strong enough margin that America even went and stole the idea for themselves under the Locust program. But while many people might use that as an excuse to point and laugh at America, saying they've stooped to copying the weapons of others, buried underneath the layers of propaganda, criticism, classification, and fog of war is the very strong possibility that America isn't actually stealing their technology. It's stealing their technology back.
I believe that you have something that belongs to me.
Because while the Shahed drone is currently recognized as an original Iranian weapon, its size and shape are incredibly similar to those of a program that started with America and later Israel as far back as the 1970s. So similar, in fact, that I think it's more likely Iran is actually just one of the latest links in a brutally ironic chain of technological handoffs. From the hands of America and friends in Israel to the hands of both America's and Israel's enemies, the Shahed drone makes a perfect case for why every country has export controls. And we're gonna get into that right after a channel announcement. The commie roasting videos are back. A lot of you have been asking where they went, and today I'd like to finally answer those questions. If you're only here for the drone and don't really care for the tea, there are chapter breaks in the play bar as always if you want to just skip right ahead. But if you're curious about what happened behind the scenes, I'll explain. I started my military vehicle videos, the corrupted intel files, by roughly going through the history and technology of aircraft that I'd heard had something wrong with them and doing everything I could to roast them into oblivion. Just complete posting energy. But that gradually shifted into me doing more and more research with every video because I wanted to know more. I mean, roasting's more fun when you're right, but because the old work needed some work, some people eventually marched into the Discord I live in and, politely to their credit, made a statement that these videos were bad because I didn't use sources from the aircraft's country. Now, instead of going straight to the nuclear option, I actually thought that was fair. I mean, would you trust a book about America if none of the sources were in English? It's academically smart, and again, roasting commies is way more fun when even their sources know it. But there's a problem with using communist sources on military tech. They're communist sources on military tech. First, I would have to go through and cross-check them to see if they're even trustworthy, but, to be fair, I would do that if I could read them.
It says we can't do that in the codex. Well, I can't read.
That's why translations are a thing, but English versions of these sources don't exist, and translating whole books at a time is not a free or cheap service. And so the workaround given to me by the leading challenger was, use ChatGPT.
And like that, you've lost me.
Now, the reason given was that it's better than Google Translate. Not really a high bar, but I also didn't have a better idea, so I sat on it. Until those who knew more than I did proceeded to inform me that AI translations like ChatGPT count as generative AI, which can be as accurate as a drunken stormtrooper at times, making it academically unacceptable. So that's out the window, but then I got stuck on a what-if possibility of some dramatic fustercluck, and so to cover my rear, I purged the commie vids anyways, moved them off-site, and stopped making more. And that was kind of it for a while I got mountains of questions about where they went. Before I remembered something.
Light bulb.
I didn't make this channel to make documentaries, it was to bridge a middle ground gap between info and funny for people who want to know a little more than what the posts tell you. And let's be honest here, I'm a YouTuber. I don't like spreading misinformation, but thinking I'm some perfect bastion of credibility is a wild assumption. I'm never gonna make perfect, best I can do is good enough, but I dug myself a hole over the demand for perfect anyways, and that sent me to critical mass.
I'm not looking for forgiveness, and I'm way past asking permission.
So I went F it, and now I'm bringing back all the old roasting videos for channel members. Why make them paywalled and not just open to the public? One, I can pay for human translators and get back to reminding commies where they are on the leaderboard, and two, paywalling counters the fustercluck over videos that I could have had more fun with. However, most people have noticed that the economy is currently living in a sinkhole, so I'm capping that monthly membership subscription price at only $2.50 a month.
It's not always about the money, Spider-Man.
That's about about half the minimum ask for most subscription services. And if you want to let people know that you're one of the OGs, one of the real ones, that you were there from the beginning, then we also have a new t-shirt that you can pre-order for a limited time on the Lockmart shop page, linked in the description below and pinned up in the corner. So you can tell everyone that you're a veteran of the great communist video purge. This public service announcement is now over. Let's get back to the video. Much like many of the systems and doctrines the US has today, the first American forays into developing one-way attack drones were also spawned from the lessons of Vietnam. In January 1973, as the US was signing the Paris Peace Accords, DARPA began looking into a low-cost attack drone that could fill the same suppression and destruction of enemy air defenses roles as the newly formed Wild Weasel mission set. This project was transferred to the Air Force in March under the codenamed Project Axillary, and the original idea was for them to send these drones out to wherever they thought the enemy was running a radar system. They would get there, hang out overhead, and when the radar came on, the passive sensors would take the drone, turn it around, and make a beeline for that radar's face.
I'm going to punch your face in the face.
Which is a great idea. It takes over a dangerous mission, and it means you don't have to order a priceless pilot to fly his multi-million-dollar fighter jet directly at the aerial version of a machine gun nest to clear the sky. And if the radar operator saw the drone coming and shut the radar off, the drone could abort the dive, go back up, and start doing death donuts over their heads in case they turned it back on. Basically letting them know that if they want to reach the find out portion of the graph, all they gotta do is turn the radar back on and it'll deliver it straight to their front door.
Fighting these things under normal circumstances is what we call same-day shipping to God.
This concept was originally labeled a harassment weapon, or a weapon designed to exhaust the target before destroying it and whatever it's protecting, but later it would fall under other names like loitering munition. Regardless, while this program was entering development, Israel would get into the Yom Kippur War with Egypt and its other neighbors in October that year. And during this conflict, air-to-air missiles and other guided defenses would do the majority of damage to Israeli air forces, which only served to further cement the idea in American military minds that drones might be a better anti-radar alternative. It also gave American planners the idea to combine drones with Wild Weasel fighters as the bait half of a bait-and-switch maneuver to decoy the radar's attention, after Israel made a practice of using firebee drones to wake up the Egyptian radar, so to speak, so their fighters could swing in and put the machine spirit to sleep forever.
Oh, shame for you. You activated my Alucard.
So in December 1974, this idea was rolled into the work from Project Axillary to make the Harassment Drone and Harassment Vehicle project, which the Air Force estimated would cost as little as a quarter of a GBU-15 glide bomb per munition, and that's not even counting the cost of the plane it was keeping out of the line of fire. However, after the fall of Saigon and South Vietnam in 1975, congressional support for the defense budget started falling apart as it usually does when a war ends, and drone programs really got the axe here, with a lot of the funding cut in 1977. And while that was the end for a lot of American drone initiatives at the time, the harassment drone program survived, with a little bit of help and under a different name. Enter West Germany. The recent MBT KPZ-70 collab may have ended in a fustercluck for both them and America, but German engineering's reputation doesn't exist for no reason. People get into circle jerk debates on subjects like M2 versus MG42 and Abrams versus Leopard 2 all the time, because regardless of which country comes out on top, German tech has a habit of giving people something to think about at night.
Okay, I know that wasn't supposed to sound sexual, but...
So when Germany, in particular the company Dornier, started looking into seed-type harassment drones at the same time America did, for the same reasons that America did, it didn't take long for the two countries to work together again.
You son of a bitch.
Germany began outlining requirements for this new drone in 1974, and by 1975, the Luftwaffe had issued a tactical request, which honestly sounds like something you do to an enemy vehicle at gunpoint after forcing its unit to surrender. And this military version of saying mine now was called the Small Anti-Radar Drone, known in German as the Kleindrone Anti-Radar, or KDAR. The Luftwaffe would join up with America later that year, and together they started pooling their efforts into development, and in 1976 and and 77, both countries ran a few proof-of-concept demonstrations with a bigger version of an E-45 drone and a Dornier pneumatic launcher. Dornier would go on to unveil their KDAR at the Paris Air Show in May 1977, and by October the following year, they had completed the first round of flight tests, proving the idea could fly before Iran even became a concern in 1979. And in early 1979, possibly because of the Islamic Revolution, the U.S. Air Force formally announced Project Axillary's successor, the low-cost expendable harassment vehicle program, codenamed Locust. And while it was effectively pursuing the same end goal as Axillary, this program was made from the get-go to share costs and development with the Luftwaffe, with Dornier making the airframe and Texas Instruments, yes, the same people who made your school calculators, making the seeker head. Because no matter who this thing gets thrown against, somebody's getting taken to class.
You want to know what death tastes like?
Both parties formally signed up on it in March 1980, and by May, there was a request for proposals. Dornier and Messerschmitt Böckler-Blom, or MBB, responded, but the program wouldn't even make it a full year before cost overruns from the Eurofighter and Leopard tank programs forced Germany to back out.
God damn it!
Unfortunately, the entire reason America had joined Germany was because they didn't have the money for it. And without Germany, guess what? They still didn't have the money for it. So the Locust gets canceled completely in 1982, and both nations end up going their separate ways. America would basically end up floundering about for the next several decades with no success, but Germany would revive the program in 1984, this time just calling it the Drone Anti-Radar, or DAR. Dornier would once again sign up to compete for the project, but soon they revealed they were once again not doing this alone, even though it wasn't America they were working with this time. In 1987, Dornier revealed that it was now working with the recently formed Israeli company Maslat, a joint venture between Israeli Aerospace Industries and the electronics company Tadaron, though it was possible they'd linked up a few years earlier. Israel, who was probably the least pleased that what amounted to weaponized microwave ovens had downed most of their aircraft back in '73, had also gotten down to business on putting points in the seed drone tech tree. And by the 1982 conflict in Lebanon, they'd finally started using these new skills from the anti-radiation class, possibly including samples of the canceled American Axillary. So they had plenty of reasons to jump on the German bandwagon, but despite their cooperation, Israel would still do Israel things. In 1986, the German publication Wehrtechnik stated that IAI was already testing their own version of the DAR, and the CIA published a classified report that the Israeli Air Force was directly helping IAI with the creation of a new anti-radar mini RPV, or remotely piloted vehicle, called the Harpy. These conclusions would look a lot more sound when the Harpy and DAR both debuted on the world stage in 1989, because they were almost identical.
That man's an imposter! That man is the imposter!
Both systems were made from two fiberglass halves with twin elevon controls at the back of a flying wing design. Each wingtip has a vertical tail mounted to it, and two more sets of fins fold out of the body to double as crash skids so that any version that's actually made to come back can be picked back up for round two. Both drones could canister launch from a truck via rocket booster and run a pusher engine that pulls gas from two tanks, or three if you take out the recovery parachute. This gave the two drones a range of roughly 310 miles or 500 knot miles, a max cruising speed at sea level of 155 miles or 250 knot miles an hour, and a max dash speed of 223 miles or 360 knot miles an hour. But despite their similarities, they weren't the same machines. The DAR clocked in at a length of 2.25 meters or 88.5 inches and a wingspan of 2 meters or 78.75 inches, while the Harpy expanded to 2.7 meters or 106.25 inches long and 2.1 meters or 82.5 inches wide, making the Harpy the larger of the two fiberglass Doritos. And because it was larger, the Harpy carried more than double the DAR's payload, weighing in at 70 pounds or 32 knot pounds instead of just 33 pounds or 15 knot pounds on the German version. It also had a larger engine than the German 22 horsepower two-cylinder, instead using a notoriously unreliable 38 horsepower Wankel rotary engine to claim twice the DAR's total endurance, or flight time, going from 3 hours up to 6 hours. But regardless of whose was bigger, both machines would still be a problem in the right hands.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
However, once again, the budget dictates the military, and if it's not there, Neither is your military. The same year that Dornier announced their partnership with Mazlat, the Israeli government decided to cancel their indigenous F-16 fighter jet knockoff called the Lavi, costing IAI thousands of jobs and millions of dollars in contracts and forcing them to look to the export market to break even. They first tried to lobby the US government to buy it, but it was repeatedly determined to be unfit for American service over the next couple of years. Meanwhile, Germany had picked Dornier to build the DAR in 1989, but after a corporate acquisition that merged them with their rival and the fall of the Berlin Wall, the need for an anti-radar drone was brought into question. Because as I said before, every time a war ends, people bring down the budget because everybody thinks that we're going to be out of people to fight. Clearly, they never checked humanity's track record.
What an idiot!
So while Dornier did run a demo in December 1992, it was pretty clear that the Luftwaffe wasn't interested anymore, and so after almost 20 years of development, the program was canceled in 1993, leaving sole ownership of the idea with the Israelis.
Oh no!
So, trying to recoup their costs, Israel defaults to doing Israel things and starts selling them to everybody who would buy them. They sold them to India in 1995 and South Korea in 1996. But before making either of those sales, in 1994, Israel introduced a fantastic little hiccup in their relations with the US and sold the Harpy to China without telling Uncle Sam.
You what?
Which I wish was a more exclusive issue than it actually is, because it seems like a lot of Chinese military stuff gets there through Israel. I mean, just look at the Lavi and then look at the J-10's mock-up. Bah, the J-10 wasn't based on the Israeli Lavi. It was derived from the J-9 project.
Wow. You can read the brochure.
Let me make this as short and simple as possible for you. That is the mock-up of the J9. That's the mock-up of the J10. The only thing in common between the two of them is the name of the wing layout. The structure of the plane, the most defining set of characteristics that tell you where things originated from, and the entire generational difference in aerodynamic shaping should make it crystal clear to you that these were completely different fighter jets. One was supposed to go mock Jesus, and the other was supposed to be an all-around fighter. Two different rule sets that require two completely different designs. So I'm 99% sure the only things the J-10 derived from the J-9 was a little bit of research on how to manage a Delta wing correctly and the fucking budget. I'm getting sidetracked. As I was saying, by 1999, about 100 of these drones had been handed off to China. But because Israel didn't tell them about it, America didn't find out until November 5th, 2002. And upon making this discovery, the US naturally loses all of its chill. So in January 2003, they sat Israel down and got them to sign a deal that they would cease all military export contracts to China, and they would not sell any item to China that could harm US security. Fast forward a few months, not even a full year later, Israel informs the US that China had requested a renewal and overhaul of their spare parts inventory for those Harpies. These first arrived in Israel in August 2004, but it took all of a few months for the US to become convinced in December that the maintenance procedure was just a cover for an upgrade process. This would give some of China's older models a tech refresh with things like a data link and multi-mode targeting, and it didn't really help that the US caught pictures of the Chinese exercising with it over the mainland close to Taiwan that same month.
Funny.
Kill you, Max? They're never going to find the body?
Now, Uncle Sam hits critical mass, they tell Israel to knock it off and hand over all the Chinese parts, Israel says no, and by 2005 the entire thing has escalated to the US suspending all info sharing on the F-35 program, which Israel probably needed to develop their own specialized version, which would become the F-35I. It looks like they still plan to sell them the F-35, I guess just not their own versions, but by August that year, the issue had been resolved. Israel forked over the Chinese parts, canceled a second planned sale, introduced tighter export controls, and was brought back on board with the F-35. Lucky for them too, because some of their recent combat ops were noticeably dependent on them using their own F-35s. All I'm saying is if they ever decide to make a derivative variant of that thing like they did with the F-16 into the Lavi, US lawmakers and militaries better veto that shit in a hurry. Don't even let it get past stage 1.
No times no divided by no to the power of oh hell no.
Because as far as I'm aware, Israel still sells military secrets to China, with one example being classified American cooling technology for electro-optical targeting units in 2013. However, some people might be wondering why selling this one little drone to China is such a big deal to the US. First of all, I gotta remind you that China doesn't consider Taiwan a legal country, even though Taiwan is the original China. Second, this isn't the simple shoot whatever Shahed drone that's been all up in the news. This one is specifically made to hunt down and attack attack radars. And for China, that was a massive leap in technology, because at the time it was reported that China's primary seed platform was the J-5, a license-built copy of the MiG-17 from the 1950s. China had supposedly converted their fleet into drones in 2002, but even without a meat bag in the seat, these planes were still big, slow, and ancient. So to modern missiles, it'd be like shooting fish in a barrel.
And I haven't had a decent challenge since.
But with these drones in hand, China could mount a credible threat to Taiwan and any US naval power backing it. So it became a big deal to prevent China from getting any more. However, if they couldn't buy new ones, they could still reverse engineer the ones they had and make their own. And by 2017, China revealed a new domestically produced version of the Harpy known as the ASN-301, which, just for reference, is 2.5 meters or 98 3/8 inches long by 2.2 meters or 86 5/8 inches wide. Several modernization packages have been introduced since then, so it's pretty clear at this point that while Israel might have cooperated with the cease order for the Harpies, the damage had already been done. But it doesn't stop there. In fact, the damage only gets more direct, because a few years after China showed off the ASN-301, another challenger would enter the ring. Now, we don't really have a fix on when the pizza slice of poverty started being developed in Iran, but what we do know for sure was that the Shahed 136 was revealed to the public during a military exercise in December 2021, along with a smaller brother, the Shahed 131, which both looks and measures out to be strikingly similar to both the original Harpy and the ASN-301.
Coincidence? I think not!
Seriously, the Shahed 131 not only looks almost exactly the same shape-wise, but it only changes about 0.1 meters or 4 inches in both length and span from the Harpy, being about 2.6 meters or 102 3/8 inches long and 2.2 meters or 86 5/8 inches wide, compared to the Harpy, which is 2.7 meters long and 2.1 meters wide, and the ASN's 2.5 meters long and the exact same width. Hell, the only way you can actually tell these drones apart are the national markings, the engine cowlings, and the payload module. And while Iran did build a drone industry from all the ones they ordered from America before they turned terror bankers, the only one-way attack drones they built before the Shahed came along were the Ababil and Samad drones that look almost twice the size and rely exclusively on simple straight-wing designs. So with the Shahed 131 being almost identical in size, shape, and configuration to the Harpy and ASNs, even if it isn't the exact same design, and even though it isn't stated anywhere I can find, it's so similar that I'm willing to bet they got their hands on some technical data from a foreign source. And considering how reliant China is on Iranian oil exports, I wouldn't be surprised if China quietly paid Iran with blueprints as part of some kind of resource deal, because that would really help explain how they pulled what amounts to a copy my homework but make it a little bit different trick with the 131, before probably scaling it up slightly to make the larger Shahed 136. The Shahed 131 also carries roughly the same payload as the smaller DAR at somewhere between 10 and 20 kilos or 20 and 40 pounds, but it borrows the Israeli 38 horsepower output thanks to a Chinese MDR 208 engine. And, seemingly thanks to the lighter payload, the Shahed 131 can reach out to between 435 to 560 miles or 700 to 900 knot miles, nearly doubling the range of the original Israeli design. The Shahed 136 then follows it up with a larger airframe at 3.5 meters or 137 7/8 inches in length and 2.5 meters or 98.5 inches wide, plus an even bigger 110 pound or 50 knot pound warhead, a 50 horsepower Motto MD550 engine stolen from Germany's L550E design, and an up to 1240 mile or 2000 knot mile range. Now, the range on these weapons in particular appears very impressive and would seem to support the idea that it is an original weapon. But in reality, for the 131 in particular, it's probably only slightly better than the Harpy's total coverable distance, because the biggest credit to the original claim of the Shahed is the fact that it's not a picky eater. From what we know, it doesn't appear to have any of the onboard passive radiation seekers that the Harpy and ASN had, so it won't go after radars in particular. It just uses Russian knockoff GPS to follow a pre-programmed flight path to a target area before picking something and making a run at it. And so far, it seems like it can only track something that's sitting still. And if it's it's not waiting for a radar to turn on to shoot it, that means it doesn't need to keep a lot of gas in reserve for doing death orbits over a target's head, and instead it can convert almost all of that to direct attack range. This drone doesn't wait for you to fuck around before it makes you find out. It's Iranian. It's convinced that you're guilty of the crime by default and schedules your immediate execution anyways. So it's probably got roughly the same amount of gas as the original tech, but it uses it differently enough to make the numbers look more impressive on paper.
It's disingenuous.
It was always going to be disingenuous.
While the world didn't know about these drones until December 2021, as you would expect from any new weapon, they had been deployed in combat before then. It's highly suspected they had been used by the Houthis on a shipping attack a few months prior in August that year, and the first confirmed use of a Shahed munition was by Iran all the way back in September 2019 against Saudi Arabian oil facilities. But it's still nothing short of sheer brutal irony that following their introduction, their most noticeable use now lies against America and Israel, two of the nations that likely helped create the weapons system in the first place. And also America's friends, because in August 2022, Iran sold 300 copies of the Shahed 131s and 136s to Russia for their special military operation that is definitely not a war. Russia calls their Shahed 131s the Geran 1s and their 136s the Geran 2s. But Russia also quickly reverse engineered the drone for their own mass production and gave their Geran 2s a few modifications, like a larger 200-pound or 90-knot-pound warhead and occasionally Chinese engines. With production in place, starting in September 2024, Russia spiked their use of drone attacks to wear down Ukrainian air defenses, and what had been an average of 130 launches a week escalated over 6 months to about 2,000 launches a week by March 2025. And it's probably going to be more of a pain in the ass going forwards, because Russia also appears to have developed a newer version dubbed the Shahed 238 or Geran 3. This one specs a little further into the tech tree and trades the propeller for a jet engine, giving it a new estimated top speed as high as 370 miles or 600 knot miles an hour, and letting it reach out to 1,550 miles or 2,500 knot miles. And as a result of this, America would finally get back into the kamikaze drone groove in the meantime, with the FLM-136 Locust testbed flying as early as 2024 before being revealed in 2025. And these are now being thrown back at Iran in Operation Epic Fury as I make this video, making America now personally invested in the highest stakes round of BattleBots ever played. So in summation, the drone wars are only just beginning, and if it seems like America is getting to the party late, they only partially are. Because Uncle Sam had the chance to start this party decades ago, but he and his friends let it get out of their hands. And now it's rather annoying to come to the realization that our own idea may be quite literally biting us in the ass. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to grab the limited Veteran of the Great Communist Video Purge t-shirts and other merch at the link in the description. And if you want to watch my Twitch streams but can't catch them live, make sure to go check out my VOD channel linked up in the corner there. And as always, if you like what you saw, please consider checking out some of my other videos. You might like what you find. Until next time, dismissed.